they're just so special, aren't they? Or, nice to see them out and about. Or, my niece has one of those. Down syndrome is one of the most recognisable disabilities. There is no doubting that these children are different because their physical features say so. But there seems to be an unspoken rule that says people are allowed to comment on that difference. In your presence, using loud voices, in the supermarket, at the bus stop. There have been many times I could have commented on what people have said. Special? No, not really. They have tantrums and tummy aches, meltdowns and magical moments, toys and toilet training like any other kid. Mum, why is that person staring at me? Richard had asked me many times. Depending on my mood, the response could be, because you are so beautiful, or because they're so bloody rude.
Welcome to the Good Reading Magazine podcast, sponsored by Pantera Press. Good Reading is a monthly magazine dedicated to books and reading and aims to help readers discover their next favourite book. You can find out more about the books discussed on today's podcast at goodreadingmagazine.com.au.
Welcome back to the Good Reading Podcast. I'm Emma Harvey. On today's episode, we are so pleased to be joined by publisher and mental health counsellor Bernadette Agius. Bernadette's debut book, I'm Staying at Richard's, Raising the Exceptional Son I Never Expected, is a moving, enlightening and joyful memoir about raising a son with Down syndrome. Bernadette, thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Emma.
Like many young women with ambitious career plans, you hadn't exactly factored a child into your life before you fell pregnant. Can you describe what your life was like before Richard came along?
Oh, thank you. My life was pretty peachy, actually. I had a very nice house in the upper North Shore of Sydney. I had a fantastic career working at the ABC, which I just loved. I was the book buyer for ABC shops. That was very rewarding and, assistant book buyer. And I had a pretty good life, great friends, amazing family, very satisfied and fulfilled. So I was very surprised when I actually did get pregnant because I had planned on a very long career within the ABC and doing good things, I guess, which is why I loved working there.
Right, yeah. And so your book goes into that. It describes those first few weeks when you found out that you were pregnant and then also when you had baby Richard. And not only were you grappling with the usual struggles of being a new mum, you were also dealing with the news that your child had Down syndrome. I'm wondering if you could share how you felt during that time.
Oh, it was kind of, as soon as the baby popped out, I went, because I felt so fabulous that I did this all on my own. And like, oh yeah, I can do this. This is great. And, I don't know why people complain about childbirth. It wasn't that hard. Terribly arrogant of me. And so I went from the most joyful, absolute, elated, God is good, the world is beautiful, I have this amazing child, to the most soul-destroying, I'm going to cry even now, overwhelming disappointment and sadness I get because of the unknown and the expectations I had for Richard. I expected he would be, the Chris Hemsworth or, David Attenborough or something really remarkable in his life, and I'd be that kid's mother. And I was fearful. I was fearful for all of us, for his dad, for me, for him, because we had no idea what life was going to be. This was, 28 years ago now, and disability was quite a different world. We are very lucky that, the world has changed in how they see that. But then it was difficult in that people just, people were still putting young babies in institutions. I was actually asked by someone, are you putting him in an institution? And that is like, wow, who does that? But that was an expectation and sometimes a given. So yeah, it was pretty awful.
Yeah. And as you say, it was 28 years ago. So you and your husband did a little bit of research about Down syndrome. And while many of us know of Down syndrome and maybe think that we know enough about it, there still remains quite a bit of misunderstanding and maybe general lack of awareness about what that really means. So I'm wondering for our listeners, if in simple terms, you might be able to define that for us.
Yeah, because I didn't know a huge amount other than we did have a family friend who had a daughter with Down syndrome, and this little girl would terrorize me. So she was just non-verbal, she was aggressive, but that was, of course, her frustration not being able to speak. So
and this was when you were growing up.
This
right?
when I was growing up, yeah. So
Yeah.
I was still a little girl, and we were about 8 or 10, and she was a little girl, and but she used to really make me laugh. So I kind of always assumed that, people with Down syndrome had a sense of humour. I don't know why I always assumed that. Again, another assumption. So look, what defines a person with Down syndrome? Physically they of course look different, and that can be a blessing and a dreadful burden because people just stare. So physically, they're shorter, squattier, their eyes are a different shape, their face is quite different. There's a similarity between all people with Down syndrome. There's creases in the back of their neck. Their limbs are often shorter. And this is a generalisation, of course, because there's always exceptions to the rule. Intellectually, they can go from a moderate type of disability to a severe type of intellectual disability. And again, it's like the rest of the population, there are scales. Some of us are brilliant, some of us not so smart. And I probably could go into one of those categories. The end of the scale, yeah. They have also capacity for being athletic and also not. So the scope is enormous, but there is several characteristics that they all do carry. That's why their chromosomes carry that extra gene. And so for a lot of people with Down syndrome, their hearing isn't, their little eustachian tubes block up pretty quickly. Their tongues are much bigger. Their body mass is what they call, gross motor skills. Their muscle tone isn't so great. So there are often factors in which you can work at and make a difference to those things. And the same with intellectually. Intellectually, people with Down syndrome will learn eventually, but it will take some time and it takes a lot of work. And that's the hard bit, I guess, too. It's just like it's a constant, here is another little sultana you need to pick up with your little finger.
Right. Those are some really interesting scenes in the book because you describe you and your partner as becoming drill sergeants almost.
Oh, I was appalling. That poor kid.
Well, raising a child with a disability, it does take incredible dedication and persistence and emotional strength as well. And you were just trying to keep up with the recommended exercises and the classes and trying to give Richard the best chance at life. How do you remember that time in your life?
Oh, look, I must admit I was a bit manic. I was just a bit batshit crazy, really. And Richard's dad wasn't. He was much calmer than I was because I'm I guess if I had to categorise myself a high achiever and expected Richard to be the same. And so if he wasn't going to be the smartest normal kid, he was going to be the smartest Down syndrome kid. Sure. So I became obsessive, mad mother who every moment we had to do something, I would do it. Whereas his dad was really like, just chill out, he'll be fine. And I'm going, no, he won't be. He's going to, be a real dunce. And,
well, that's probably good. You need both extremes.
Yeah, it was a good yin and yang.
Yeah.
But it did cause me a lot of problems then because I became so obsessed that I ended up having terrible anxiety attacks and just overwhelmed myself with expectation, which I think is a bit of a disaster really for a lot of new parents because you want to achieve those milestones the same as other kids. But then you forget that they're actually still a little person, that you're still a parent, you're still a family, and there's a lot of fun to be had. And I think my kind of light bulb moment was to go, oh, okay, I need to really chill out here because I'm going to drive not only him crazy, but me crazy and everyone else around me crazy. But it was, you want to achieve those milestones and you want to make sure that everything works for him down the track because what you do when they're little has huge ramifications as an adult. So, for instance, and Richard won't mind me saying this, he still can't do up a button properly because we really just kind of gave up on the button doing. But we talked a lot, so we were a family of talkers. So Richard now talks so much. He never stops talking.
That's such a great part of the book where you were praying and I'm hoping that Richard would grow up to be able to talk.
Yeah.
And then you say later that there's a kind of bitter irony almost to all of that because he's such a chatty guy.
He never stops talking. He rings me 3 times a day. I go, just leave me alone. Stop talking to me. And he goes, Mum, I'm your only son. Actually, I'm your favourite son.
You got your wish.
Yeah, I got my wish indeed. So yeah, it was filled with a lot of homework, and we had to do a lot of stuff. So it is difficult. And I had one child, whereas a lot of families have more than one. So we could give Richard our all, but it does take a lot of work.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, you also mentioned that you put on an I'm fine kind of face for a long time, which you later say you would not recommend to other parents. What would be your advice to other parents maybe in similar circumstances?
Look, I think it's important to just be truthful, that it's, I think we feel that because we say this is really hard, this is really sad, this is really difficult, it's actually a reflection on your love for that child. But it's not. You still love your child regardless. I loved my baby and I adore him now, and he's a great person. But I was struggling, and I made the terrible mistake of not letting people help me, where I just wanted to put a brave face on everything. And I got myself into some terrible mental health issues because I just wasn't being real. I wasn't telling my sisters how difficult it was. I wasn't telling even my husband how difficult it was, because I didn't want my love for him to ever be in doubt. But in actual fact, I think what I did was to then get into such a state where I couldn't be the mother I really wanted to be, because I was always so fearful that something bad was going to happen, or that I was a bad mother, or that my expectation, I wasn't the maternal type anyway, so like as soon as Richard could actually hold a remote control, I gave it to him and told him how to use it, because Barney the pink dinosaur, the purple dinosaur, was better at doing entertainment than I was. But I think my message would be, just be yourself, and it's okay to say it's not that great sometimes. And and other mums do too, regardless of whether you have a kid with a disability or not. Parenting is hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard, especially if it doesn't come naturally to you.
And you mentioned the television, which is another great moment in the book, where Richard grows up to really love the TV and love his video games, but it's also sort of doubles as a tool of learning.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing.
And language.
I'm sure half his speech came from, just watching and mimicking. And it was a great babysitter, I have to. Yeah. I'm not going to beat around the bush on that one.
Well, the book is full of those kinds of funny, sometimes frustrating, heartwarming memories. I wonder if you could share with our listeners any of your, which I know is a tough question, your fondest memories from when Richard was really young.
Oh, there are a couple, actually.
Yeah.
Because we underestimate, because people, if the child isn't verbal, and this is regardless of anything, that you think that they don't have that cognitive capacity to do things. So several things that made me really happy about Richard, that I thought, oh my God, he's not that stupid. He's actually, so it was Christmas Eve, and I have a very, very big Maltese family, and we have big present giving. And so I had Richard with the remote control at watching television with our faithful hound next to him, Comet. And I left them there, and I think Richard might have been 3 or 4 at the time. And the tree was beautifully sorted, and just gifts everywhere. Beautiful gifts, all wrapped, because I had the family coming to me for that year. And I went outside, and I just felt something wasn't quite right. I was doing some gardening or getting something together. And I walked back inside, and he had unwrapped every single present under the tree.
Oh my God.
It looked like World War III in there. There were bits of paper over him, over the dog, and he was sitting there holding this toy that clearly he knew was for him, and he looked at me like, oh my God.
Red-handed.
And he looked at me and he pointed the dog, and he said, he did it.
Oh my Lord.
So that I thought, and I was so angry. But then I thought, oh God, he can lie. Isn't that good?
Oh, there you go.
He can lie. He's got cognitive skills that says, I'm not going to go down for this one. The dog is.
Oh, what a conflicting moment.
I know. That was so funny. And those things made me laugh about him. And he also has the sweetest, kindest nature, where he would know when people weren't comfortable with him. That also taught me a great lesson, that my expectation of everyone wanting to accept Richard as he was not everybody else's desire. And I had a very, very good friend who came over once, very clearly very uncomfortable with Richard. And he just went over to where her handbag was and took it to her and said goodbye. And I just knew then that he had that capacity to understand emotion and understand feeling and understand goodness. And that was the beautiful side of growing up, watching him grow too, watching him emotionally develop. Yeah. And I wanted people to see that, that I think I talk about, and you may have something there, I don't want to preempt you, but, about what is your normal,
Sure, yeah.
And this is our normal. Our normal is this life. I don't know what it's like to have your life or to have your listeners' life. This is our life, so this is our normal.
Yeah.
And people are judging that, and I think we judge too much about other people's lives. It's, I'm really happy with my life. Richard's really happy with his life. We have a great time. And I know a lot of parents and families who've got kids with Down syndrome. That's their normal. And it's good. It's their life,
Well, yeah, I mean, as you read in the extract earlier, in the chapter Slings and Arrows, you acknowledge that a lot of people's reactions and intrusions, while they may come from a place of curiosity, there's a level of basic respect and etiquette that simply isn't extended to people with disabilities sometimes.
Yeah.
So rather than gawking or whispering loudly in supermarkets, if people do have questions about disabilities and disorders, what do you propose is the best way that they could go about that?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. Yeah, look, because I think if people are curious, it's a good thing, as long as it's respectful, and I think I've had people come up and say, oh, I think you're so, brave for having a child. I don't think anyone's brave for having a child, like really. It's a big responsibility. Because I think it's what you said before about the unknown. And I think that's really important. But for me, if someone came up and said, what's your life like? I'd tell them truthfully what it's like. And I'm happy for people to ask about Richard as long as it's always respectful.
Sure.
Yeah. And that it's not... And for anyone with an intellectual disability, I think sometimes that, people will talk to me and not talk to Richard. I think I really don't like that. They'll say, oh, can you please tell him? Well, no, you tell him. He's standing here right next to me. You tell him. Oh, and they look at me like, please help me. And I go, no, you ask, because you're asking about him. Because I wouldn't, be there with you and your partner, for instance, and say, oh, what do you think Emma thinks of this? I would ask Emma. Yeah. So I think that's a really important part of how I would deal with that.
Right.
Ask the person.
And I think, you say actually in your book that even if you don't want to be, sometimes parents kind of have to become inadvertent advocates for disability. So, maybe if you didn't always want to have to bear the burden of answering everybody's questions about every little curiosity they had, are there any other resources you'd recommend or books?
Oh yeah, there's
websites?
Lots of, and a lot of the websites are really good now. Down Syndrome Australia, Down Syndrome. All the states have their own websites, and they're very good. They're full of information. They're full of good facts. There are people at the end of the phone that will always pick up, especially for people like teachers who have a little person starting at their school. There's lots of resources out there that they can get as much information from that people can go and access. There's a lot of course, like anything on any website, there's some misinformation. But I just go straight to that source, and speak to people. And often, people will come to you. So each of the associations have parent support, and they're really happy to help people with any questions. Because we don't want, it's not a secret.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like, we're in the cult. It's like, we want our kids out there and having a great life and being well educated and being and inclusion. Inclusion is really big.
Well, that does bring me on to my next question, which is that Richard attended Mount Ku-ring-gai?
Yeah, Mount Ku-ring-gai Primary School.
Primary school?
Yeah.
So it was an integrated school. And I guess my next question is, why do you think that's important to include students with disabilities in regular educational settings for students with disability and also for other students?
No, it's good. It's important. And I think, and I have thought about this for a long time. And there will be people that disagree with me. So it's a thing within, I guess, any organisation or any community. We all have different opinions. I was really determined, as was Richard's dad, to integrate Richard and include him as much as possible in those early years, because we felt that we didn't want his life to be about being disabled. we wanted his life to be about being Richard and being a kid. And we wanted to also be included in a community of that. Having a child with an intellectual disability at a mainstream school opened up the eyes of all those other people. And they kind of went, oh, okay, this isn't scary. These parents aren't widows. These, this is perfectly all right. And we were very lucky that the community was so accepting and loving in many ways. There were clearly some issues, as there always are. But I think the most important thing was that Richard learnt good behaviour, or what is acceptable behaviour, from other children. And other children took it upon themselves to help him achieve that by including him, as did the school community. Now, I'm going to go back and say that's not necessarily going to happen for most. It's not a given that a child will learn, or a child will in a community will be given those instructs. But we were lucky. But it was also, I think, the most important part for all of us in that time and in that place, was it didn't scare people. There was an acceptance. He was a very sweet little boy. He has a good, kind heart. And that was really important for all those other families to see. And they championed him. They all did. And the kids at the school, his classmates, these little boys and girls were just so, they didn't see his disability. They just saw that he needed some help. And that was, and kids are great. Kids are fantastic. They just go, oh yeah, we're just going to do this. And look, and as they got older, like any cohort, even if we're, if you're a popular kid at school, you're not going to hang out with the dags, or your perceived dags. It's just how it is. Or if you're in a high achieving class, you're not going to associate with kids that don't achieve as high as you do.
As Richard got older, and then when it came to the question of high school, and you were debating that as parents and considering what would be best for him, you write that Richard came to you and helped you make that decision by simply saying, I want to go to St Edmunds, which is a school for, it's a smaller school that caters to students with mild to moderate intellectual disabilities. And he said that he simply didn't want to come last any longer.
Yeah.
And you said that was it for you. So how did Richard's experiences at St Edmunds compare to the state school?
There were two different things. So I think what we wanted to achieve at Mount Karinga, what we all did, and his teachers, was just to give him basic good reading, writing, learning, a good school environment, but also to socialise in the real world. And it's not that we didn't want him to socialise with other kids that had an intellectual disability. That wasn't it at all. We wanted him to know. We wanted it to be about inclusion in the world. Yeah, because your life isn't always going to be sheltered, and we wanted him to have those highs and lows. But he was getting, clearly for him, far too many lows. Because he's a little bit competitive as well, I found out. Which, another thing, I never, these expectations. I didn't expect you to have a competitive streak, but he's really competitive. And so when he realised that he would be with people that were his intellectual equals, that's when he said, I wanted to go to St Edmunds. What St Edmunds did, although he still did good learning, and actually they were terrific as far as the academic side of things was concerned, was he had a social group of people that he could start going out with. And although the kids at Mount Karinga were just beautiful, they were growing up, and they, didn't want to hang around people that weren't in their same cohort. And I understand that. I don't have any intellectually disabled friends. It's just how it is. So when he got to St Edmunds, he suddenly had friends that were his age, his same interests, and that he could relate to. And I think that was the really important thing for him. And he really did go from strength to strength at that school, which was great.
Yeah, and we hear from Richard a few times in the book. You get him to talk about or write about his experiences at different stages in his life, particularly at St Edmunds, where he excelled. He was the deputy school captain.
Deputy school captain. Thank you very much, Mother's Pride and Joy.
And yeah, as you said, you guys were really lucky, and you had a really good experience, and Richard had quite a good experience during school, and you acknowledge that that's not necessarily always the case. And there's some statistics, for example, like the one about bullying, that 51% of students with disabilities are victims of bullying compared to a 23% in non-disabled students. And a lot's improved in recent decades, but there's still lots of progress to be made. So I guess my question is, what do you think can and should still be done to support young people with disabilities in our schools?
And look, statistics always change, don't they? You know, daily. You know, it's like a budget. It always changes. I think it's very hard for people to see beyond the intellectual disability, that people do get hurt and that they have needs and wants. And where do you put your most expectation, I guess, as a teacher or as other students? So there's a lot of classes that have, I don't want to use the word segregated, but, you know, specific special needs classes. And they're on campus, but they're often separate on their own. I guess what I would like to see, which I think probably would work better, is to have complete inclusion. So children with intellectual disabilities in the main strength class, because then they're not a cohort on their own. They're part of the school community rather than part of those kids who have got intellectual disabilities. Look, it is hard because some kids' behaviours aren't great and it is distracting, and those other children are there to learn. I think educators need to come up with a solution where they are the voice of reason, so that the teacher, the principal, the culture starts from the top. This is what our school represents. This is how we do this, and this is how we all do this together. And once we start getting to that point, I think things will change. And it's not hard. It's just someone being brave enough to not be scared, to say, okay, we're putting Johnny into class A, we're putting Samantha into class B, we're putting, and integrate them that way. And look, and that might be difficult to start with, but eventually will become the norm. It's just taking the steps.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
To go then to the end of school, when Richard was graduating, you helped, is that correct, secure some funding for a transition to work program at St Edmunds?
Yeah. Oh, no, sorry, it was after he finished.
After he finished.
After he finished at St Edmunds, yeah. So it was with Catholic Care up in the Broken Bay Diocese, and they were just so fantastically supportive. I said, look, you know, we need to do something. These kids are leaving high school. There's some other things, but they're not what I want.
Yeah.
I would really like you to do this.
Well, yeah, what were the employment opportunities available?
Very little, and still that actually is getting harder. You know, that's something we need to work on. But there were some places that what we call community participation, where kids could go there for day programs and not really with the view to go to work. Or there were some places that would have the kid for one day, and this was all about funding, to get them ready to go into a work environment and find them some work. But I wanted something that was like, I didn't want Richard at home. Basically, that was the bottom line. I didn't want him sitting on his ass watching television, although he could use that remote control really well. I wanted him to be engaged 5 days a week. And so the program, therefore, was about getting young people with an intellectual disability ready for work. And St Edmunds put in a program of doing work experience in some places, which worked really well, and they were fantastic, and got the kids. And also Richard went to TAFE. So he did... 1 year he did office administration, 1 year he did cafe work, so it was great. But when he left school, it was then another transition. And so that program, the transition to work program, was to get them ready to go to work properly, not a 1 hour per week internship type thing. It was a proper job.
Yeah.
This is getting ready for a proper job. And a lot of those young men and women got great jobs out of it, which was terrific.
Yeah, and as you say, Richard wanted to work. He wanted to do just what everyone else was doing, and he saw the value in it. And, I wonder, can you tell us a little bit about his journey into the workforce over the years?
He was I love telling this story of a friend of mine who had a sister with Down syndrome, and she one day just packed it all in. And they said, why have you left work? And she went, I'm bored with it. I don't want to do it anymore. But she kept going back every week to get her wage.
Ooh, that was funny. Nice.
So we kind of went, okay, how are we going to deal with this? But Richard, when he got a job, it was like the biggest light went on in his whole being. It gave him a sense of purpose. Actually, he had that when he started the transition to work program. It was like going to college, I guess. But when he got this job on his own, through his work experience, it was like he had won the lottery. He walked taller. He became more manly, I guess. He became more adult and he became more responsible. I can do that, Mum. I can do that. Don't worry, I can do that. I have a job now. And it was really wonderful to see his pride in himself. And isn't that what we, when any of us get a new job or, get something, we're very pleased with ourselves. And he was just really happy.
And what kind of work has he done?
Well, he got this great job at a pub. So he did his work experience at the pub and they offered him a permanent part-time job, 5 days a week. He now does 4 hours, 5 hours a day because he still gets tired. He still, as with that muscle tone thing, he still has to do a lot of work on that. But they offered him the job, so he picks up the glasses. And they've been terrific in that they give him a variety of jobs. We're supported by a company called Job Support, which is based in Chatswood. And actually, they're based all over Australia, I think, now. And they help the organisations on a monthly basis to make sure that the person that works for them is doing, what they're meant to do and that they're getting supported in the workplace. And although Richard's been there a long time now and we don't really need job support as much, but they certainly have been instrumental in making sure that the wage is fair. And look, and I never had any problem with Richard's job placement being like that. But for some organisations, they just need some structure. So, I think that's where I'm getting to with this conversation is that people can take a bit of a plunge into employing someone with an intellectual disability because there's actually good support out there. And the difference in that person's life that has the job is amazing. Richard can catch the train all over Sydney. He's independent. He thinks Uber's the best thing in the world. I'm just going to Uber that, Mum. Which also makes me think I don't have to go and pick him up at midnight when he goes out somewhere.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, so, his sense of confidence, and I think anyone with an intellectual disability that has a job gives them that confidence. I have a job. And isn't that what we all want? I have a job.
Yeah. And not only a job, he's got a girlfriend.
He has got a girlfriend.
Which the book also covers. It covers the topic of love and relationships.
Yeah, he and Ashley have been together for a while now.
Wow, yeah. And why did you think that was important to also include in this story?
Look, and I ummed and ahed about this because it is, encroaching on people's personal space and it's, my story, not Ashley or her family's story. But I thought it was important because, again, I don't think people understand or respect the desire to be loved and to love. I mean, again, like a job, relationships are human. It's so important to, be hugged and to be looked after and to have that, caring person in your life. And so Richard and Ashley went to school together and they had always been friends and then they started a relationship. And then after, I think, 5 years of being together, they decided to move in together. And it hasn't been easy. There's been some, but they are a great couple. And I just love, they argue the same as other couples. They love like other couples. They have a nice domestic time together. They look out for each other. Occasionally Ashley will tell me off for being a mean mum, which I think is fabulous. But that's great.
Yeah.
How good is that? And he'll say things like, oh, Mum, I just really love her. Oh. And I think, oh, my God, how good is that? And how good?
How completely just like everybody else.
Like everybody else.
Yeah.
And isn't that a gift?
That's what's so striking about the book is just how much of Richard's life is just like everyone else's.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons people should read it is
Thank you.
for people to realise that. And Richard's 28 now.
Yep.
So how's he doing?
He's amazing. He's fantastic. He's the funniest person. Well, right now we are steeped in rugby league season. So and look, the other thing that I think is really important is he is a bloke. Like he is male and he is, male in the way that all us women go, oh God, that's disgusting, or he's so sweet. But he also, it's rugby league time, so he just talks football all the time. He works in a pub, he does sport. He will sometimes be very rude to Ashley, and because he just, gosh, shut up, Ash, I'm watching the football. Like, you go, really? How did I raise this child? But he is amazing. He works in a fantastic environment with amazing people, beautiful men and women who really have his back. They tease him. I walked in there the other day and he and one of the chefs were having a great old laugh about something, and that just warms my heart. he's got a great relationship. He has a good social life. He has lovely friends. He has family that adore him. He's got his dad and his stepmom and his stepbrothers who are just lovely people. And we all have, one thing in common is that we want to make sure he has a good life.
And he clearly does.
And he really does. And he knows it. I got a voice message on my phone the other day going, Mum, I just wanted to say we had a great day today and I love you. Oh. And that was, what more do you want in life?
Yeah. So he's a blokey bloke, but he's also...
Oh, he's Mum's little boy.
Mum's boy, yeah.
And you can wrap Mum around his little finger with Oh, sure, honey, you can do that.
And has he read the book?
He did. And I was actually really surprised.
There you go.
And for all my, soapbox standing, I actually didn't think he would want to. And I sort of went there the other day, said, so when can I read it? I went, oh, okay, you can read it now, and handed him over, very reluctantly a copy because I thought, oh my goodness, I never thought, he was excited about the book being written. He knew it was being written. He understood all that stuff. But then he read it and I was really shocked and delighted. I said to him, should we read it together? He said, oh, no, I'm okay. And he read it and loved it. So I was really pleased. He asked a few questions. He was upset about one or two things.
Couple of corrections.
A couple of corrections. And the rest of it he really enjoyed.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So, and I'm glad he was able to tell me what he wasn't happy with.
Yeah.
That he knew that there was some things there that could be uncomfortable for him. And I'm glad that he raised those and we talked about them and he was fine with it.
Yeah. And I guess it is tricky to be writing a book about yourself, your life, Richard's life, family. And you said that when you committed to writing the book, only later did it occur to you that this was actually going to be kind of tough.
Oh, yeah. I kind of went, when someone said, would you like to write the book? Yeah, sure, can't be that hard. Oh, my giddy aunt. Now, after, I think we've been in the process of writing for 2 years, it took me a while to get it all together. It's very confronting. And it was cathartic and it was sad and it was humbling and it was joyful and I feel very exposed, but I don't regret it. I tell you it's worth it
because it's an excellent read and totally compelling, like beyond all of the content and the research and the themes, just the writing.
Oh, thank
really
you. I had a lot of help.
I'm sure. From Richard.
Yeah, from Richard, yes. He's in there.
And so the note that I wanted to end on was if you could go back to yourself in that hospital, hearing that your son has Down syndrome for the first time, what might you tell that young mum?
Oh, I'm going to cry.
Sorry.
No, it's a really good question. Look, I probably would have said chill out. He'll be okay, and he is okay. And don't be frightened. Don't be frightened to speak. Don't be frightened of your voice, and don't be frightened to take on challenges, and appreciate what you have. Our little people with Down syndrome are just as worthy and deserving to be here. Oh, sorry, as many others. And I think it's a real shame that people don't celebrate that. So one of the best things my family did, came in with balloons and champagne and went, yay, we've got a baby. And that's the blessing. And so that's what I would have said to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. Oh,
I'm so sorry.
No.
On that
note, Emma, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm Staying with Richard is available at all good bookstores.
Oh, hopefully, yes.
And on the Good Reading website, www.goodreadingmagazine.com.au. Bernadette, thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you so much, Emma. It's been a joy. Thank you.